Okay. We are good to go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Preparation and Entry Subcommittee meeting on August 18th, 2022. Appreciate everybody being here today. This is going to be our final meeting together, potentially, unless something else happens, that we can get some of this work done. We've been trying to finish for a while now, so I appreciate you being here. Do you want to go ahead, Kim? Dr. Evans sent out the minutes from July 19th through email. Let's approve those first, and then we'll talk about the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll motion.
Thank you. Have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. All in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are passed. Just a few seconds ago, you should have received in your email today's materials and agenda. You can kind of see on the screen the agenda we're going to go through right now. Do we have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. And second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion around this agenda? Okay, all in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, today's agenda passes. As you can see, we have the areas of work for today that we're going to be engaged in together. The first is license level edits. From our last subcommittee meeting, there were some recommendations made that we need to concisely put into language and make some decisions about that will go into the final draft model. Next one is the license one teacher. Is this going to be a teacher of record or not? And if not, what do we do with it? And what constitutes a traditional educator preparation program? There's definitely been lots of questions about that, and we're going to need to define what that means. And then finally, what does affiliation to an EPP mean, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum from license 1 to license 3? That'll be, I think, some great conversations and a great amount of work, and I'm not going to continue beating that one down. If you get to the next slide, the goal is the same as it has been here for a while, to write concise recommendation language for the work areas in the agenda so that we can get our final draft version ready to present to Pepsi. And Van, I'll turn it over to you from here on.
Thank you, Hank. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I know all of us, regardless of which space we work in, is at an incredibly busy time of the year. We're on day 3 at UNCW of people, faculty and students, faculty coming back, students starting to come back. So it's fun time, but it's a hectic time. So thanks to everybody for the time and energy today and, over the last 16, 17 months. The basic plan, Kim, correct me if I missed the sequence and things. We're going to start with breakout groups, and we are looking at the document where we have been editing the language across the licensure areas. Erin, I'm not sure because she did anything other than be the first person to type on screen, became the keeper of those edits. And so she's been helping us in these meetings to manage that editing process. And like Hank said, the more specific and clear in the language we can create, the more that language is going to be represented in ultimately what starts to get pulled together in the draft that will be looked at. Kim, the co-chairs will see the current state of information on August the 25th.
Yes, that's correct. As much as can be done between the licensure subcommittee meeting and the 25th. They're pretty close together. I have not placed people in breakout groups yet. I wanted to see how we were trying to put together these edits. I know that you had talked about Dr. Horn having kind of the source of those. So I didn't know if you wanted to try to share it as a whole group to go through things, or I'm happy to do breakout groups and then I can use the groupings that we had made for the last meeting that we didn't get to. I can share that link.
Yeah. We have 14 people, 14 members on the call. And
Okay.
yeah, it may be helpful, at least for a first step, to break out into 2 smaller groups so we can increase the level of participation.
Okay.
And then, Aaron, the document is such that we can share that in the chat, so both groups would have it. Am I correct?
Well, no. So, I mean, the document that I had been typing in the previous meetings was in the folders that we had used for the breakout groups. So
Okay.
I didn't know, and typically we would have new folders for each subcommittee meeting. And so I didn't know if there was a new folder for this week with the documents that we're supposed to be working in this time.
So for this week, if we wanted to move forward to license 4 and the advanced teacher licenses, because that's what we did not get to go through last time, then those are in the folders from last month, and I can easily provide that link.
Yeah.
So whatever works best. But the folder that Dr. Horn is talking about are those same folders that I'm using from last month.
Yeah. And Hank, I think if we can make sure people at least go back and revisit the previous edits, that we're clear in what we have. And then I know Patrick, Patrick has 13 days left on Pepsi. We were trying to make sure Prep and Entry at least looked at license 4 as a transitional state and then into advanced licenses. So maybe if we could take each one of the breakout groups could look at 4, and then if you have time, look at 5 and 6.
That sounds like a plan.
That makes sense, Kim?
Sorry, hold on. I'm putting
And then
everything.
because we have until 3 o'clock, maybe in this first breakout, we could take about a half an hour in the breakout.
Oh, okay.
Diane had her hand up.
Yes, thank you. It's been such a busy summer, as you noted. I just wanted to ask if we're going back to these same folders from July, what work has DPI or the co-chairs or anyone, has anything happened to the work since it was we last engaged with it as a subcommittee? Have any of those revisions been made or pulled together? I'm just wondering where it is now as compared to, I guess, July 6th, 19th.
So that's in process, but you won't see it in the folder themselves. Those are being worked on the draft slides. And so that is in progress right now.
So will the subcommittee have the opportunity to review what some of those edits have been made or suggestions from the subcommittee thus far? I was under the impression that might be part of our meeting today. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So those aren't ready to be shown to subcommittees yet. They're still very much in progress. And with decisions being made mostly during the August meetings, we really need to wait through most of the August meetings in order for them to be complete. So you won't see tons of changes right now because the absolute recommendations have not been made by most of the subcommittees. Budget and compensation probably has made the most recommendations at this point. So as far as seeing the revised model itself, I know that Pepsi leadership, I don't know if Dr. Dempsey wants to speak to this instead of me.
Well, the working document that we have in the subcommittee remains the working document. Language is being used from that to start to pull together what would be the first draft of the combined document. But if any revisions that we make in the working document cause revisions in the combined document, those revisions would be made. I'm saying that correctly, right, Kim?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So just trying to pull together what the DPI folks are doing now is trying to pull into a combined document what the tentative language is currently on the basis of what's being done in the subcommittees. And also remember what Kim just said. We don't know where the subcommittees will be hours after today, and then the other three in preparation for the co-chairs seeing this information on August the 25th. Because it depends on what the state of drafting is coming out of each one of the chairs, out of the co-chair, out of the subcommittees that will be seen by the co-chairs. And then if we can wait till the end of the meeting, I'll share a little bit about what is tentatively planned to happen after this meeting in terms of subsequent co-chair meetings, and then what ultimately goes before Pepsi. If we can hold that until after we do the breakout group and then the whole group activity that we're going to do, then we'll talk about what happens in the Pepsi level of this.
Okay. If you don't mind, Ben, I'm happy to wait for those next steps to be shared. I think as a point of clarification for this agenda, I came into it anticipating that we would see something like that today in this meeting, and we didn't receive the materials in advance and we typically do. And so I thought there might be some work that had been ongoing. So I think that's just a point of clarification for me of what is our point of engagement here in this particular meeting. I thought we would have some opportunity to do that, but it sounds like later in our meeting we'll hear from you about some of these next steps, and I appreciate that.
And I apologize to the group about not sending the materials ahead of time. I thought I had, but that was for the meetings yesterday, so I apologize. That was not intentional.
So just to clarify, we're going to go back into kind of the original breakout groups we had used in June and July to make sure that we have finished clarifying that language for the license that we were working on at that point, but also thinking about 4, 5, and 6. And then we will come back together to discuss those other questions that were on the agenda.
Yes, the 3 questions that were on the front end.
So is everyone clear as far as Dr. Dempsey assigning each group what license they're supposed to look at? I know that the apprentice license was already pretty much finalized by this group as good to go. So group 1 would get the apprentice license. So could you look at license 4 or one of the advanced teacher licenses instead? Is that good with you, Dr. Dempsey, Dr. Weddington?
Yeah.
Okay, and 30 minutes, correct?
Who do you want to go in which groups? I don't even remember what group I was in.
I didn't put it as what you were assigned to before, so you'll probably end up in a different license this time around. But I think it's good to have a second eye.
And let me, Kim, to go back to the previous question that Diana asked, our working document is our working document. There is not currently language sitting somewhere else that supersedes our working document. So we're now looking at the language that ultimately will become the working language of that document. So we are writing that language. That's why Hank's point about being as clear in our recommendations as we can be is important, because ultimately that's what populates the full document. So there's not secret language sitting somewhere that's going to be unveiled at some point. Every bit of clarity we bring to what we have been doing is what becomes the basis of that comprehensive document.
Please forgive me, Dr. Dempsey. I was not suggesting that there was hidden language somewhere, but I did anticipate seeing that some of this would have been pulled together for this meeting and that would be presented. But and so if that's a matter of time and opportunity to be able to do it, I understand that. But I was not insinuating any way that it's being crafted outside. I just thought we'd see it today.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear. And adding the additional subcommittees is what has subcommittee meetings is now altering that, the things that happen in the next step. But it really reinforce, what language do we want in that comprehensive document? That's what we want to focus on today.
So there's 4 breakout sessions. Sessions. 4 breakout groups. There's between 3 and 4 members of each group. So group 1, as you know, would be apprentice, but instead you could look at license 4 or one of the advanced teacher licenses. Breakout session 2 would look at, or breakout group 2 would look at license 1, and then group 3, license 2, and then group 4, license 3. Any questions? Okay, we're good to go.
Hey, Kim.
Hey, Tom, they're in breakout sessions for another 30 seconds.
Okay, well, I'm just dropping in, but I'm going to be in and out of my office. So don't let anybody call on me, or if they do, just tell them I may not be here.
Okay,
All right, thanks.
sure.
But it looked okay, didn't look like.
Kim, we all back?
We are all back. Do you want me to go through the breakout groups to start the review?
And clearly that took more than 30 minutes from our group. Yeah, and maybe if we Hank, we check in and see where we are after the first 30 minutes, and then.
Yeah, we were all over the place. We had level 4, and so that's really the first time we dug into that one, and kind of even hard to know where to start. But we have lots of thoughts on that. But I don't know if you want to discuss maybe the other levels leading up to that, since we've done more work on it.
Okay. Kim, let's do one.
Okay, so group 1 is Jeff, Hank, and your other teammate left for another meeting. So it'll be Jeff or Hank.
Yeah, we had 2 teammates that left, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, okay, we can go ahead and go. And Jeff, please jump in. I tried to jot down what I could here as we were talking. We were looking at level 4 and what it would take to enter. The first conversation started around out-of-state teachers and where they would come into this new model. And Jeff, you can help me out here, because Budget and Compensation put forward that if you're a continuing licensed teacher in another state, that you would enter in as a level 4 teacher in our state, and at that point be under the same requirements as level 4 teachers are to keep that license. Is that right, Jeff?
That's correct. That was what was discussed yesterday. Kim and Tom, I don't know what was officially approved, but that was what we had discussed. And the same, it would follow how a transition would work for current teachers in state, that if you have a CPL, you would move into license 4, and then you would then, depending on where you are in your renewal cycle, would then start the 5-year cycle under the new requirements or the old requirements if you still have a few years remaining.
Do you want me to share? I know that Dr. Lease was having a little bit of trouble tracking. Do you want to share your screen with your notes, or I could do that?
Yeah, you mean the proposal that was discussed yesterday?
Is that what you're thinking about, Dr. Lease? Or are you talking about what they discussed during group and the notes they took?
I'm having a little trouble navigating our notes for this particular group, but I certainly would be happy to know what happened in yesterday's meeting a little bit too. Jeff hinted at that, but I was mostly for our group, just to track across from levels 1 through 4.
Yeah, can you pull up the notes from the breakout?
Sure.
Yeah, we don't.
So are the notes actually on the slides, or
They're not.
they're not? Okay.
They're in front of me, but I will get them on there as we.
Are you putting them in the Word doc, Dr.
Yeah.
Weddington? Okay. Then I will share the Word doc and then they'll appear.
I think I'm sharing the right one. Number 1.
And it's for license 4, is that correct?
That's right.
That's right. Okay.
But it's under the apprentice teacher license notes from that breakout group 1.
Oh, so you're okay.
That's where we started.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. There we go.
The first one was placement of out-of-state teachers at level 4 if they had the license. And I'm sorry, the possibility of typing and talking at the same time is going to be crazy. So I'll catch up on that as we go. The next thing that we talked about is some of the language, and this might be easier to talk about if I can share, Kim, the actual slide that we were working from as we were talking. Is that possible?
Dr. Weddington, you're free to share. I can stop sharing.
Okay, that'd be great. I think this is probably. There it is. So this is what we were working from, or the 2 slides around licensure 4. I apologize that we were having a hard time knowing where to start. But one of the things that came up immediately was, I know there's been a lot of issues around demonstrating effectiveness and what that means. But one language clarification that Jeff suggested that I think I agree with as well is that instead of saying something like growth measure through EVOS or qualitative growth review, that instead we say that the language is a measure of student growth, and perhaps EG, or for example, EVOS data or qualitative growth review, something that doesn't point to EVOS as the number 1 highlighted measure of effectiveness. Is that accurate, Jeff?
Yes, and I think the idea was, again, if this becomes effective, EVOS will probably be the measure that is used, but there seems to be some confusion about EVOS also including proficiency, and I think it's good to clarify that what we're talking about is student growth, not student proficiency.
Okay.
So that was a quick question.
Yeah.
What's the plan for when we don't have EVOS to be able to gauge teacher effectiveness? So, for example, we have EVOS data for, in high school, for example, English 2 and Math 1 and biology. But what about the other subjects where there's not an EVOS growth measure?
I don't know that we have that yet. I mean, I think that's part of what have to be developed, right? We do have the OR qualitative growth review, but in terms of a growth measure outside of EVOS, that doesn't exist at this point for those areas. So that would have to be developed by the state and piloted and validated before we could begin using that.
So those teachers would have access to the qualitative growth review and the evaluation student survey component, so that they would have those. But the state does have assessments that measure growth for every class and every teacher through the NC final exams. They were abandoned in statute or in session law or whatever a couple of years ago, but those still exist. So there are measures out there. They're not perfect, but there are some other measures out there that could be reconsidered. So,
Kim, I can't pull up the minute. I think it was the last co-chairs meeting. In terms of ultimate recommendation language, that the focus of this part of the discussion broadly, not just in this subcommittee, was on evidence of student impact. So number one, we're looking for evidence of student impact that could take multiple forms. Two, EVOS is not structured in a way that it can inform, that it can meet that purpose, that we would be able to look across all teaching areas, all licensure areas. EVOS is not designed to do that. And that the qualitative growth review is, as it appears in this PowerPoint, which is the one from a few months ago, is intended to imply the intention of a form of evidence. And rather than literally say qualitative growth review, what are examples of the intention of that evidence that we're talking about? Because we don't know what those specific forms of evidence would be.
So for the qualitative growth review, they were looking at student work. So it was, Dr. Tomberlin had talked about it being, what was it? Analysis of student work. It
like
was,
the ASW. We did
yes, like ASW. Yes.
And abandoned.
He had said that at the beginning when this was introduced as a draft.
Mm-hmm.
So it is similar to that. So gathering student work at the beginning and the end of the school year.
Thanks. I'll share just a couple of more thoughts that we had. And again, this is all. Christina brought up a good point that in license levels 1 through 3, even the apprentice, we had kind of focused on the INTAS standards as the competencies we were going to be looking at, and that we would create an evaluation that would align with those. And the question was, given the lack of reliability we have with the NESIS right now and the feedback from the field, should we replace the idea of accomplished in NESIS to evaluation with some instrument that is aligned more closely with INTASC in the areas that we're looking at for level 4 teachers to be proficient or exceeding in? And that's a question we're throwing out there. One more thing, it says that traditional PD will be offered by the PSU. We thought that language should be adjusted to say traditional PD offered and accepted if they're doing it outside of the PSUs for the renewal of their license. And we had a brief conversation about what's it going to take now to renew if we're looking mostly for an output-based or outcome-based system. Are we still looking for so many CEUs of input to get to that output? Or does it matter? Or does that encourage people to grow even if they are doing a great job in the classroom? So that was a conversation. And the last thing that we wanted to make as a formal recommendation was that regardless of what we decide on these measures of effectiveness and impact, that we believe everything needs to be piloted and checked out with feedback from public school teachers and administrators before any implementation happens. And I think the same recommendation came from Budget and Compensation yesterday, and we just wanted to add our voice to that.
Advancement and Development has also recommended piloting for implementation, as part of implementation.
And that's what we got to on level 4, unless, Jeff, you have anything else?
No, Hank, I think you did a fantastic job. The only other thing I'll add, we did not make any decisions on this, but it was a question that we thought needed to be addressed, is if someone achieves license 4 and then leaves teaching, for instance, like many of our colleagues here, they might go into an EPP program to teach teachers, or maybe are out for a few years to raise children, or move to South Carolina for a few years, whatever it might be. What would be the process for them to maintain their license, since they will not have student outcome measures available? We discussed a couple of different ideas. Maybe it's just maintaining some level of CEU credit so that their license continues to be valid, so in case they return. But nothing was decided. But that was one question that we thought might need to be addressed at some point.
Thanks. Kim, I think that's it from our group.
Okay. I was just waiting to see if there were any additional comments. For group 2, it's Aaron, Laura, Dyson, and Van.
So I guess I'm sharing. I'm happy to. So we looked at license 1, and we took what had previously been talked about, and then also added some of the questions that were on our agenda for today. So we recommend that the license 1 is not the teacher of record, because within the requirements, there is no kind of pedagogical knowledge or demonstration of any pedagogical skill. And so they're not the teacher of record, but there could be times when they're in classrooms fully responsible for the pedagogy and content, so that they're able to demonstrate their basic level of pedagogy and content required for the license 2, but it's not an all day, every day event. So they're working under the mentorship of a higher level licensed teacher, like a 5 or 6. The requirements for entry into a license 1 would be the bachelor degree or higher, or the specific CTE license. For specific CTE licensure areas, the industry certification and experience. And those would be the CTE areas that currently allow those to allow for entry into the license. We also said successful completion of 18 hours of relevant coursework as determined by the employer and or EPP as established in the MOU. And so when we were talking about what does successful completion mean, that could mean whether it's a grade point average in those 18 hours minimum, or a specific grade wall. And so talking about a grade wall meaning like they have to have 18 hours of a C or better, or a B or better, or whatever that may be, for entry into the license 1. And then they must affiliate with an EPP or a PSU, took out the or, put in an and. So must be affiliated with an EPP and a PSU that establishes a specific advancement and development plan for progression through the licensure pathway. And we actually have an asterisk next to the PSU on that, because the state of North Carolina does have some private schools that have approved beginning teacher support plans on file with the State Department that allows them to recommend teachers to move from an initial license to a continuing license. And so if a private entity, private school, wants to allow their teachers to work on license 1 and move through the system, then they'd have to agree to kind of all of the supports and things that are in place for those licensure areas. And then, yes, then the clock came up and we didn't get to any of the supports. And I really feel like we could have, like, we really just need an all-day retreat to flush through all these, but we're all really busy. So that's where we are with License 1.
So I'm going to give you guys an idea of where we are right now in our hiring process. School starts in a week. I have 20 plus openings, teacher classroom openings. This year is my 19th year in HR, and we have never had to hire as many alternatively licensed folks. If we, I'm shaking, sorry. It's been a really stressful hiring season. If these folks cannot be at license level 1 teacher of record, and if they don't have the opportunity to have at least a semester, if not a full year, to align with an EPP after being hired by PSU, we will only have substitutes in our classrooms for quite a while. I'd rather have somebody who's got a 4-year degree that I can teach and train and support than have a substitute. It is such a struggle right now to find anyone to even apply. I've got 12 elementary positions right now open and 0 applicants. We are really struggling, and changing the license level 1 from the or to the and not allowing those folks to be teacher of record, which they have been able to be for at least the last 20 years with lateral entry and our current structure. We won't be able to fill our classrooms.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, Ray. And I know you're not alone in that feeling. I think the conversation that we had was, because I was, we started out this conversation like, ideally, what do we want, and then what in reality is happening. And those are two things that are very far apart right now in our system. But in the world of what we want, what's best for classrooms and what's best for students, yes, somebody with a 4-year degree is better than a substitute, but what's the best, right? What do we want? What do we want to strive for? And we don't want licensed 1 teachers that have 0 pedagogical knowledge, even though we're doing it right now. Just because we're doing it right now doesn't mean it's the best thing for our students.
And I don't disagree with you, but yeah, if we can't hire folks and provide them the support, those second career folks, people who are making the choice to come into the classroom, if they have no entry point, because this gives them no entry point, we are putting up additional barriers for people to come into education. And I know in my group, we had the conversation of, it's been a struggle to get people into your ed programs at the university level this year. That's only going to get worse over the next couple of years. We've got to remove the barriers and then provide the support for folks, as opposed to put up additional barriers. That's just my feeling.
Yeah.
So can I ask a point of clarification?
Oh, absolutely.
So when you're saying the barrier, is it because we are saying that they have to affiliate with the EPP and the PSU at entry into the license 1?
Yes. Right now, even with lateral entry, it takes a semester to a year for folks to be able to align with an EPP. Very few, unless they're in their 2nd or 3rd year of teaching, are actually already aligned with an EPP in a residency program when they come to us. Okay. It takes time to get through that whole process.
Thank you. And then somebody else had a comment, I think.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was just going to say, as an HR director in Henderson County as well, I agree with Ray. At the end of the day, when we start thinking about the question that I have is like, what does it mean when we say paired with an advanced teacher or mentor? Is that something where, who's providing the lesson plan each day? Because in the world that we live in, the expectation is if I'm the person that's planning the lessons, then I have to be the teacher of record. When I start looking at how this is going to affect, the overall pay of our principals, we start thinking about, their compensation as well, because EBOS for principals and how they're paid is going to matter as well, because that's going to have, a ripple effect into, financially how they're compensated. And I would just echo just briefly that, in my personal opinion, if we're going to implement this, then we're going to have some bridge to get us to this next stage of licensure. And in my personal opinion, we're going to have to offer the opportunity for retirees to get back into the classroom. There's no other way for us to be able to implement something that's going to have, when we start talking about piloting, I cannot agree with you more. We need to be able to find out what are all these things that are going to be our challenges. Because even though where we still have different subject areas, to Mr. Coltrane's point, that we still can provide some level of EBOS, right? Some level of data. But folks, we have physical education. We have all these art programs, these art teachers. We've done the ASWs in the past, and we found out those were not a perfect world either. And what we're finding is what we've already known about public education for years. And I don't want to sound preachy about this, but it's the reality. Being able to judge that effectiveness is the most difficult thing that we do. It's not keeping score like in a football game or a basketball game. These are people, and this is very challenging. But if we're going to get to the other side of that, we've got to have a bridge to get us there, folks. Because right now, when we can't find teachers in Henderson County, North Carolina, to put in elementary programs, we've got a problem. So I apologize for that, but that's the reality. And I just wanted to echo that with what Ray had said.
Aaron, to follow up on that, there's not a conceivable universe where there's not going to be a bridge, because whatever the model is that ultimately gets recommended, and let's say that right model goes through the state board and then it goes on to the General Assembly and is funded, it's going to still take several years to get to that point. And so, we're living with the reality of how we hire now for at least a few more years. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, if we could build the model that we want and fund it, would we be hiring people to come into classrooms with zero experience, with that level of that includes preparation experience, when we got to that point, let's say 5 years or whatever that amount of time is out in the future, versus we have adequate support structures to be able to help those people transition into the profession differently than what we do now, which was the point that we discussed in the breakout group we were in. So, I mean, in terms of the work that we do in Pepsi, a month in and month out, I can't imagine Pepsi is going to put up any obstacles to basically, if the only people we can hire in 2022, 2023, 2024 are people who are coming in through that clinical residency kind of model we have right now, that model's with us for a while if these recommendations, whatever they are, go into place, while we build out that bridge to get to that point and get that bridge funded. Make sure we have adequate funding to be able to do that. My fear is, and this was when Aaron brought the question up, if we don't propose that structure now, we'll never get there. We'll be doing this for 20 years the way we're doing it now. Aaron, did you have I can't remember where you dropped off.
Yeah, no, that was because we only got through the requirements, really. That was all we had to share.
Thank you. Group 3 is Ray or Randy.
Ray, you want to take it, or do you want me? I know we didn't.
I gotta go back and find it now. Sorry.
Well, and really, I don't think we had anything to contribute to over. We kind of switched levels here over what we were looking at before, and this may be anticlimactic.
I think that the previous group had fleshed out a lot of things, and their recommendations around the peer tool, around the micro credentials. We felt like we're right on target. Randy, I don't know what else.
Yeah,
we did talk about the teacher role that a license 2 would be the teacher of record, because we would in the field we need them to be, but still receive all that support from the advanced teacher. I'm sorry, Van, did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was going to ask if you had that edited into the notes.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you share that? I mean, can you pull that up?
I will have it on my desktop and not on my laptop. Randy, do you have it pulled up? We just tried to highlight changes that.
Is this right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So I just put in red the places where we had made a change so that they are the teacher of record, but still getting that support from the advanced teacher, and continue to recommend that the PSU does have that flexibility on developing the in-house or partnering with the new teacher support program. We had some conversation about micro-credentials, and, one of the comments in that particular section previously was, how do we vet those for rigor, those kind of things. And all agreed that's going to be a big task. And then knowing, are those monitored? Are tasks that are submitted, are they scored? Does the individual get feedback, or is it more a self-paced kind of piece? A lot of micro-credentials are simply self-paced. And so what the accountability piece would be for that would be important to determine. And anything else, Randy?
Nope.
Okay.
I think you did a great job.
And the last group is Diana, Heather, and Scott. And please let me know if you would like me to share my screen.
I dropped the link into our document into the chat for everybody. You can take a look at, I think like Ray said, the last group had been in here and they worked in red, so we decided to work in purple. Sometimes it's been difficult I'll go back to my earlier question from the beginning of the meeting, just wanting to track the work, right? So, and see what's happened with it. So our comments are here in purple. Heather, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think I had been in this group previously, so it was good to have both, because I think sometimes we thought we knew what we meant, but it was not clear on the slide. And so I think one of the things that we were really talking about is trying to be careful about balancing all these needs we've been talking about today, and not always have the solution for that, but at least ask some questions, especially if you scroll down towards the supports. one of the things that we were talking about is right now the way it's written is that there will be weekly peer reviews by a level 4 or higher educator. And while I love the idea of that, and I think I'm speaking for myself, but I think for my group as well, we're really concerned about the burnout that places on those higher educators that also have classes and students of their own, that we're just piling more and more on the plate. And we want to make sure that that's manageable. And also not every school may have enough level 4 or higher educators. And so then what happens and where's that support coming from, was one of the things we wanted to flag as far as support goes. One of the things we wanted to highlight that I think we are all in agreement on is that successful completion of level 3 does not include a pen and pencil licensure exam. So the praxis, letting go of that, but maintaining either the EdTPA or the PPAT or some portfolio of credentials similar that demonstrates competency in the classroom makes good sense to us, along with observations to triangulate that data. Did I miss anything, team?
No, I think you did a great job. I'm going to mention one thing else. We got a little off track about some other things, and you guys probably did in your groups as well. One thing that came up for us, though, is just thinking about how difficult it is to recruit people into level 1, 2, or 3 licensed positions right now, with the salary that we currently have and where we are. So I think that part of our conversation was also the hope that across these subcommittees that those recommendations for budget and compensation will include professional compensation for a level 3 teacher.
And in the salary, Diana?
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
When you say compensation, you mean in terms of the salary?
Yes, salary, longevity, and benefits also came up as part of our conversation. So it wasn't just salary, but mentioning quite a few other things that I think educators, teachers in North Carolina have seen go away in the last several years.
Kim, I'm assuming this is budget and compensation. I just noticed I don't have a title on the top of the notes. The 8/11/2022 minutes, I think, of budget and compensation, have they been posted? Are they public?
No, those minutes, I'm working on those minutes.
Okay.
So you can ask me if something became a recommendation. Is that what you're?
Well, I'm following up on Diana's question that at least based on the current discussions in that subcommittee, the license 3 beginning salary would be $45,000.
So it would, yes. So it would stay that way for the duration of that license. One of the items on the agenda was to see if there would be any type of increase for that license. However, they did not have time to talk about that.
Okay. But that is the annual increase is in discussion in budget compensation.
So that was approved, and that was a 1% for license 4.
Okay.
Each year. So that was approved as a recommendation. License 3 was on the agenda, but there was not enough time.
Okay. So once their notes are ready from their most recent meeting, then that information will be out of the subcommittee.
Yes, and that will be used to update the draft model as well.
I think yesterday, if I remember hearing right, or Kim in the Budget and Compensation Committee, that the licensure committee had recommended that anybody that completes an EPP program would be eligible for license 3, separate and apart if they had passed the EdTPA or the Praxis. Is that correct?
Yes. So that was approved as a recommendation, and have the ETPA or the PPAT, so the pedagogy assessment as the checkpoint for that. Not the content exams.
Okay, got it. And that is a traditional 4-year bachelor program or an MAT program or a licensure only program, correct?
I know that they talked about a traditional program.
Okay.
But to hold license 3, that person would have to pass a performance assessment at TPA, for example.
Right, as well as complete that program.
Which is where we are on license 3. Is that the folks who just did license 3?
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Lisa talked about only if the student surveys and QGR are approved, right? And was that, Dr. Lisa, were you talking about for licensure if they approve that on Monday as far as an effectiveness measure? Is that what you're saying there?
That was tagging onto a comment that I think Jeff made earlier in our meeting. I forget which license level that was, but talking about, I think he was distressing the fact that other metrics would be available. And I was just questioning whether or not those had been approved as metrics that could be used for teacher effectiveness yet, and that sort of thing. I didn't think that those had been formally put into the model. So a little out of order on that one, sorry.
Yes. I just wanted to go back to it because licensure meets on Monday, and one of their items on their agenda is to look at effectiveness measures and decide which measures they would want to use for effectiveness. So yes, to your question, if they are approved. They are approved as far as being used as a measure, but as far as using it to calculate effectiveness, that is something that will be discussed on Monday.
I'm not sure I follow that. They're approved, but not necessarily approved for effectiveness.
So they approve them as being able to be considered as a measure for the model, but we want them to actually look at whether they want to use it for effectiveness as an effectiveness measure. Because they went through and said yes or no to each of the measures, but they didn't say, yes, we want to use this in particular for effectiveness. So they would be looking at, in particular, the effectiveness measures and whether they agree with those or not.
That was licensure you're talking about?
Yes. I believe that's a 1:00 meeting on Monday, the 22nd.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hank, just keep an eye on the time. We got about 25 minutes. And I want to make sure we circle back to the work areas needing recommendations, and they were on slide 2 and the PowerPoint that went out. The edits that we just walked through, the licensed 1 teacher, the question of whether that person will or will not be the teacher of record. 3, what constitutes traditional educator preparation? And Kim, the reason that question came up was around the question of the performance assessment. That educator preparation programs would require, to hold that license, would require successful performance assessment. And then the 4th one was the license 1 to license 3 affiliation to the EPP, because that is currently at each one of the license levels.
Did you want to focus on a certain one right now?
Well, let's go back to license 1 teacher, not teacher of record, question mark. The breakout group and some previous discussions have, for the purposes of the proposed model that the licensed one teacher should not be the teacher of record. And having given adequate wait time, any comments or I know there are different perspectives about that.
Y'all know how I feel about it. So.
Well, again, I would just pose the question: if they're not the teacher of record, then who is? Because someone has to be responsible for the lesson planning. Someone has to be responsible for the instruction. And if it's the mentor teacher is not in that classroom every day, and the person who is in the classroom is the licensed one teacher, just from my perspective, then who would it be if it's not them?
My understanding was that it would be the advanced teacher for adult leadership who might be one of those multi-classroom teachers through the advanced teaching roles that we've heard about. That was my understanding. I invite others to correct me.
I would agree with Diana that they would still have primary responsibility, but it would be shared under the mentorship of that level 4 teacher. And because there will be times where they will need to take that sole responsibility, but they don't have any skills at that point in order to do that. And so I would want to make sure that they have some basic knowledge of pedagogy, which we don't have in any of the requirements for the licensed one before they were allowed to be solo with students. Solely solo, right? They would still have kind of a mentor that checks in on them, but thinking about the co-teaching and co-planning and things that happen within that classroom, that there's that shared responsibility between the licensed one and the advanced teacher.
And to me, that makes sense. When I put my principal hat back on, that makes sense when I'm thinking of a co-teaching model. Right, that is completely understandable, because I think when you look at that does make sense. But when it's not a true co-teaching model, and that teacher is down there responsible for their own class, when I think about that on a daily basis of what that looks like, or a weekly basis, I don't think that's viable. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not saying in theory that would not be in a perfect world, that would be the correct way that we would want to see that. But the reality of it is that teacher's down there and they're highly effective for a reason. And what I would hate for us to see is that in an effort to build that capacity within our building, the teachers who are in that level 4 who are highly effective, that we start to reduce that level of effectiveness because they're trying to do more than what they are capable of doing. And so again, I go back to, they're already in that classroom without the pedagogy. That's the reality. They're there now. They're going to be there at that point as well. And so not putting more on someone than there needs to be is just that concern.
I think my other concern too, Scott, is in counties like we've got 28 schools. We've got some amazing teachers, and we've got enough folks who can cover those roles in every school. But some counties, some city school districts don't have that. They have a constant churn. They have a lot of turnover. And will they have enough of the advanced teacher folks to be able to serve in those roles?
Ray and Scott, to follow out that point, if we continue to hire, let's say we hired teachers as licensed one who have no pedagogical experience, no preparation, they come, professionally speaking, stone cold into a classroom. Mm-hmm. You still have to put supports in there to help them. So the question is about the teacher of record, right? Who actually is responsible for that assignment of that classroom that is different from we don't want to ever leave them in the room totally alone, and they just got to figure it out. There are going to be support systems that are in place to help them build their expertise and capacity as a teacher.
Right. Those pieces are in place now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's not any different than what we're doing in our schools right now. We have those support systems in place. They exist already.
Mm-hmm.
Are they adequate to the demand?
The structure, I can't speak to every place in the state, but the structure we have in place here has been adequate to support those folks over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, our beginning teacher programs, everything that we're doing trying to support those folks by giving them a mentor already, having monthly BT meetings, doing everything that we can possible to support those things are already, like I said, they're already in place. Are they enough? I don't think there's ever enough, because at the end of the day, they are missing the pedagogical part of what they need to be successful. They have the content, right? We understand they have the content piece, but the art of teaching, the skill in itself, is what they're trying to learn. And so, again, when we think about like teachers of record, and again, I think it does matter how we communicate that to people, because what is the responsibility of that licensed one teacher? You know, what are they responsible for? Because that licensed 4 teacher, folks, as much as we want them down there, it's not going to be as consistent as we would want it, because it currently exists and it's just not available.
And those support, so people who are serving as mentor teachers, people who are serving as beginning teacher support people, are they being appropriately compensated? Are they being given appropriate amounts of flexibility in their time? Are they able to have time to be with the teachers in the classrooms without compromising their own teaching in whatever it is that they're doing?
So for the mentors, the answer to that would be in Henderson County would be no. But that's why we have instructional coaches in place. So the instructional coach is playing the role. We have that mentor who is playing one part of that equation. Then we also have the instructional coaches who are not in schools full time. They're only, so for example, we may have one instructional coach who serves 2 schools, but they're working with all the beginning teachers between both of those schools to help provide support as well. And those folks have the time because they are not dedicated to a specific classroom.
And then for us, we have those people in place, as well as master mentors who are retired master teachers. And when we've got somebody coming in who we know is going to struggle, they don't have any of that pedagogy, that master mentor is in to support them, anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week to give that extra coaching and modeling piece. Now, not every district in the state does that or can afford to do that, but that's the way we've chosen to use our Title II dollars.
Well, and I think that's the important key, right? Ray, like Ray and Scott, you both have systems and supports in place within your districts. However, it varies so widely across districts. And many of the times, when I'm talking to people who are mentors of folks that are coming in as residency with zero preparation versus mentoring someone who's come out of a 4-year EPP, they talk about the drastic difference and the amount of time it takes to mentor each of those. And so that's where I think, again, we have our reality that we're in right now, but where do we want to be? And y'all, I think you both said, like, yeah, that would be great if we had that. But that's not the reality we live in right now. But I think we need to design this for the reality that we want. Because the idea of lateral entry came in as a way to meet that emergency need that we have. And we want to create that in a way that does it what's best for our kids. And so maybe it's not necessarily using the term not teacher of record, but maybe it's co-teacher of record or something along those lines, but that there are formal structures as part of that license so that no matter what district they're in and however anybody chooses to use their Title II funds, that there are some common understandings about how much support those teachers at License 1 who have zero pedagogical knowledge are going to get.
And maybe
This is-
I'll talk. Go ahead. I apologize.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe it's helpful for Tom or Kim to clarify the term teacher of record, because to my knowledge, there's no licenses currently that are not a teacher of record. So the permit to teach, emergency license, residency are all teachers of record. So if you make this not a teacher of record, then essentially they're a substitute teacher with a license who is not responsible for the education of their students. And I don't think that's what we're envisioning. And so maybe it's helpful to clarify that, because I do think, Aaron, to your point, the model as it's written currently includes all those supports for the required supports, with a license for advanced teacher, affiliation with an EPP, all the different components that you're discussing and that Ray and Scott have said are there. But is having them not be a teacher of record actually mandating those supports, or is it creating a tension that's not necessary, if that makes sense? But Tom and Kim, can you clarify on what the term teacher of record means?
Yeah. So,
okay.
Sorry, Kim, I am here. I don't have the full context of this conversation, but I can. So teacher of record is who's listed in the official record, PowerSchool, in this student information system, as being ultimately responsible for the education of those kids in that class. So, and there is, to answer your question, there is no license issued by the state that precludes any teacher from being the teacher of record. So even the permit to teach, which is kind of the lowest level license we currently have, that allows the teacher to be the teacher of record. I do agree with the challenge of saying that a licensed one teacher can't be the teacher of record. That introduces a lot of challenge, and I'm wondering if something like supervised teacher of record might be an alternative to that, because in my mind, those advanced roles would be used for those purposes that Scott and Ray just described. And the intent is not to supplant those roles, but to give you the allotment or the dollars to have those roles without you having to use, lots of budget not shenanigans, but lots of budget manipulations to achieve that. I think there could be a balance there where what we really want is those licensed one teachers to be supervised by one of these advanced teachers or somebody that's supporting them closely. Does that help?
I'm wondering if perhaps the phrasing is co-teacher of record. Because I think I'm hearing this tension of they don't have the skill set to be on their own. And so in an ideal world, we've got these teachers who are supervising, but if I'm just supervising, that's a different level of ownership and commitment than if I'm co-responsible for these students. And so if I'm truly half and half here, these are our kids, that's a different level of commitment and responsibility. And I think that speaks to everybody's concerns.
Yeah. I would agree with that, Heather. Yeah.
I think my only concern with that is when we start talking about what a true co-teaching model is, and we think of it from an EVOS standpoint, again, we're going in and those teachers are actually taking 50% of that responsibility each. If that one teacher in a licensed one is really only a mentor and it's not a true teaching model, then that could be, again, Dr. Tomlin would be able to talk to this even at a greater level, but that would to me, that would skew how EVOS and how that is being used to judge teacher effectiveness if they're not truly responsible for half of the instruction, if they're just mentoring.
Yeah, and Hank, I'm trying to keep my eye on the time, and we got a couple of other things, and then I want to go back to that first question. And Hank, I'm also going back to the point Aaron raised in the breakout. When we were in the breakout, we talked about licensed one teacher of record if. And it sounds like in these situations we're talking about a person can be teacher of record licensed one if these systems are in place. And that plays out every day in higher education with EPPs, because we have undergraduates who are doing an internship that absolutely cannot be the teacher of record. We have MAT students that could be the teacher of record because, in effect, they know more than people coming in as licensed one, but we wouldn't call them the teacher of record because they're not put out there for that. When they go out into their schools, they're not out there for that purpose. They're out there to be interns. And so I think back to what Ray and Scott were saying earlier, I think, Aaron, it actually is there's a middle ground in the license one, license two transition. They can be whether we call it co-teacher or find other language, they can be the teacher of record if.
But I think there might be a space for that, certainly, Van, but I'm taking issue with the argument that we can't create a new licensed position where it's not the teacher of record, when in this model itself, we're proposing an apprentice teacher, which arguably would carry some kind of license or credential, and they're not the teacher of record. So I'm not sure I'm finding that being the convincing argument there. I think we're trying to create a whole new model. And it might be that we need to have these different steps. And perhaps in license one, as Van was just saying, we need a half step. But I think I'm feeling the struggle in our conversation today between living in what is and developing this model of what we really want and need it to be, because it's supposed to be more streamlined, less complex, and open doors to classrooms for people who might not otherwise have pursued it. And I'm feeling a lot of tension in that today, and I'm not sure that the model where we are right now has that.
I agree, Diana. I've had the same kind of issue. If we're thinking about this in an ideal world way of what we really want it to be, I've continued to have just an issue with why we need a license one. So we've got an apprenticeship where we've got our interns living right now on the actual scale. They know a lot about pedagogy, and they've had experiences, but they're living there until they've completed that internship. Why doesn't everybody, that doesn't have a minimum level of competency or experience start at apprentice, and then they jump to that, what we call license two right now, and become teacher of record? So there's no in between that's not teacher of record, but also teacher in the classroom. And again, for Ray and Scott, that's ideal world, thinking that this new system is going to bring in enough teachers that we won't have to continue doing what we're doing with residency licensure. But I don't know what purpose license one serves in this particular model, except maybe to get somebody in an apprentice to keep moving forward more quickly because they could get a pay bump. And I don't know.
Yeah, but guys, again, I would say to you, the apprenticeship is where you have a true co-teaching model. At least that's the perception I have of this model. That means if I'm working as the person who is the apprenticeship, then I'm working with a level 4 teacher. I'm actually learning how to run a classroom. I'm learning the skills from someone who is already highly effective, right? We're trying to recreate that. So that's the apprenticeship. But if you take away that license one, and I understand what the perfect world looks like, but folks, I cannot be any more adamant. If that goes away, you're going to cripple us. If we don't have the ability to hire people to go into that classroom right now that have a 4-year degree that can step into a residency license, folks, we wouldn't be able to, we would be just right now 15 to 20 teachers short, because that's how many people we've hired into a residency license. They don't have any pedagogy, but they just have a 4-year license. And if that goes away, that's a problem.
Scott, I don't think there's that. I think the chances are minimal that that's going to go away. Even if we were to stay where we are, and that question came back to Pepsi, I can't imagine Pepsi would shut off that possibility given the straits that schools and school districts are in.
It's 35% of your pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Diana's right. There's a difference between we got to live in the profession we're in for a window of time to get to the point that some of these resources and solutions have been given time to become successful. And then schools and school districts are looking at a different scenario. But yeah, we can't flip a switch and this starts next July. That
That's
just
right.
is totally impractical. Or
Well,
I think this conversation is really focusing on, like, when we think teacher of record and all the roles and responsibilities that come in with that, is that we want to find a way that those that are coming in as a license one have fewer things, right? Like, because right now a license one comes in and has all the same duties and responsibilities as somebody, or a residency licensed teacher comes in, has all the same duties and responsibilities within that classroom as someone that's been teaching 20 years. And that's unfair to those teachers, right? Because they do not have, many of them, I don't want to generalize and say all of them, but many of them do not come in and have those pedagogical skills. There are some that come in and do an amazing job. But for the most part, they've got to have the ability, the time, and the space to be able to learn those skills before they are kind of set free with their own class of students. Because we do know that in the 6 months it takes them to kind of get their feet underneath them, that's 6 months with students, with real students and that instruction. And so we have to make sure that we are doing what's best by kids here.
One thing I'll point out, I know the discussion about the apprentice and license one. So I think the key distinction to remember, at least in this, is that the apprentice does not require a bachelor's degree, while license one does. So the apprentice is a wholly new idea, never had anything like it. License one, actually, we already have. It's permit to teach, it's emergency license, it's residency license. It's all three of those. That it just requires a bachelor's, and that people come in, they're already teachers of record. It's far from ideal. And if school districts didn't need those licenses, we wouldn't have them. And so I think that's something, this is the license where ideal meets reality, is that unfortunately districts need permits to teach. They need emergency licenses. They need residency licenses, because those are the people that they can get into the pipeline. And I think the hope would be is that we no longer need license one, and how many ever years from now, because the pipeline's functioning again. You guys are flush with students who want to become teachers because we're paying them a professional salary and we're supporting them appropriately, and districts will no longer need license one. But I think the reality is that districts need it, and they need them to be teachers of record, because right now there's no other teachers to hire, unfortunately.
we have no choice right now.
We have no choice. That's right.
We want to create choice.
That's right.
We now have 2 minutes. We want options. Let me say very quickly, we have, Kim, for the sake of the questions that we had at the very beginning, it sounds like the two subcommittees that we're talking about this issue of license 3 and the performance assessment are on the same page. The licensure level edits, we'd have to go back and pull all that we did today into one way to see all the edits together. The not teacher of record, we've landed for the moment in a, there's more transitional space there than we thought. And in the current reality, schools and school districts have to be able to hire people into those licenses. And then we have this question about affiliation to EPP. Let me also answer the question from way back in the first part of the meeting. One of the things we're doing outside the meeting is Hank and I are meeting with the other co-chairs, and we're trying to figure out as 8 co-chairs, where are we in this process with the folks at DPI and with the transition in a Pepsi chair, about how close are we in this process to having some kind of ability to pull together a comprehensive draft and what that looks like. We also are having to navigate all this with Pepsi and the state board, because there's a sequence of meetings that then happen at that level. So I know that does not answer in detail the question that got asked, but Hank, I feel like we got to sit down and look at what's the content of the discussion we have as of today's meeting when we talk again as co-chairs, and then we've got to figure out across 4 subcommittees where this process is, which is what the upcoming co-chair meeting on the 25th, I think, is in part for.
That's right. Well, are we at adjournment or?
That was robust. I enjoyed that.
That was. Good. We could use that full day retreat for sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, seeing as
I could just use a full day retreat.
yeah. For real.
No, but I think we do. I mean, we get into some really great kind of conversations in this group that, I mean, and I know I'm not kind of blaming anybody in here, but 2 hours, by the time we really kind of get in and dig into it, then it's time for us to go. And so, yeah, it's just.
I agree, Aaron. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you want to ask for a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I would like a motion to adjourn, please.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
We got a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, click your red X. We'll see.